Today I have Zeina Azzam with me. She's a Palestinian American poet, writer, editor, and community activist. She's also the poet laureate of the city of Alexandria in the state of Virginia. Welcome so much to On the Breath, Zeina.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we're able to have you on. And we were talking just a bit about some of the focus of your work.
Well, being a Palestinian American poet and someone who came here as a young child, I have a lot of experience and, angst in a way, but also I feel this is very enriching to me as a person. Being a Palestinian, being an American, being of two cultures, having languages. My native tongue is Arabic, but I learned English as a child, and now since we came here when I was 10 years old, I, excuse me, feel that English is my stronger language now.
Mm.
But there's so much identity wrapped up in language. So those are some of the themes I write about. Of course, I write about Palestine, I write about injustice, um, and I'm a community activist. So I work within my community here in Alexandria with vulnerable communities and civil rights kinds of groups as well.
I think it's often the case that our early experience can define our mission in the world. And it strikes me how much in common you have with actually a lot of my clients, many of whom speak English really well, came maybe around the age that you did and are aware of a sense of limitation in their native language. And even so, to my ear, oh, they speak good English. There's a feeling for them, at least, of insecurity around how they're perceived. They may speak accented English. So a lot of the journey is how to be fully authentic.
Mm.
And there's been some interesting occurrences of people really starting to feel ease with public speaking in English, who've then told me, and my other languages have improved enormously. So it's there in the body and the brain. That's been really a surprise and really exciting. But I just wanted to share that because it's something that I'm in the waters of very much with people around identity and language.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really interesting to hear. And I, in the last few years, I've started incorporating actually Arabic words in my English poetry. And it feels more authentic. It feels like that's really all about me. Um, and then of course I have this, need, this desire to have my children learn it as
Mhm.
well. And I haven't been as good about that as I could have been. But so it's like as an immigrant, how do you pass on the culture and the language to the next generation?
Mhm.
I actually have a poem about that if you would like to hear
I'd
it.
love to hear it.
And this one actually incorporates some Arabic. And and I won't tell you what the words mean because I think it should be apparent from hearing the poem.
Mhm.
A language for colors. Asfar, she would say, pointing at a yellow tulip. And the color of grass. Akhdar. My young daughter had mastered not only the colors, but also the throaty KH, two letters in English that equal one in Arabic. I would tell her it's the same sound as in khamse, khubz, sabanich, five, bread, spinach, and my favorite name, Khalid, immortal. I once confessed to a friend wistfully that I would not name my son Khalid because Americans couldn't pronounce it. Now I wonder about such wisdom. Even my 8-year-old could constrict her throat muscles the right way to say Khalid, immortal like an ancient olive tree, a flame that never abates. a mother's love. This spring, I saw a patch of double hybrid tulips, asfar tinged with akhdar, and thought of my daughter's satisfied grin at learning those words thousands of miles away from her grandparents' home in Palestine. Here we are, hybrid Americans, living between two languages and speaking in colors, splendid flowers in a distant field.
It's so evocative. It's
Thank
so
you.
evocative, and I really, there's something that the phrase that comes to me is the taste of words, the taste in
Mm,
the mouth, um, and also Khalid is a name that I am familiar with
uh-huh.
because there's quite a lot of people who have that name, but I didn't know what it means. So it's very satisfying to hear it.
I love that name. I always have. And it's interesting you say the taste of words. I've been looking at this concept of synesthesia. Turns out Duke Ellington, the famous jazz, pianist and composer, had synesthesia, where he would see colors when he would hear music
Mm.
notes. But it's also about combining senses. So tasting words is an example, which is really interesting.
It's so funny you should mention this because I found out about 4 weeks ago that I have synesthesia.
Oh my
I
goodness.
didn't realize it. I don't have that kind. Colors, numbers and words have color. That's one of the aspects that I have, and also numbers have personality. And I just hadn't thought about it for really, I mean, as a child, that was just how I saw them. And I just never mentioned it and didn't think much of it. And so I'm thinking it's amazing at my age to actually discover something like that. I'm sure if I'd had maybe a more dramatic form, I would have known. But
Well, this is a gift nonetheless. I think that's wonderful that you have.
yes, I think it definitely informs my writing. And as a playwright, I'm thinking about how I'm very visual as to how things, and I'm also hyper visual. So I see things in a lot of detail in my head.
Mm.
And I realized in knowing I have that, I went, oh, no wonder I write my plays in this way, where I'm trying to provoke the audience to have to have a more multisensory experience.
Like the one you're having.
Yes, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. So,
That is so fascinating. That's wonderful.
and Elif Shafak has a TED talk that I think is entitled, okay, I don't know that it's entitled this, but one of the key phrases in it is, can you taste words?
Mm. Hmm. That's lovely.
It is. It is, which now that we're having the conversation makes me wonder about her particular inner landscape. So let's talk about one of your more disempowered moments with voice, which we can interpret in terms of the word voice in so many ways.
I thought about this for a bit, and I think the biggest uh, sort of disempowered, although I'm not sure that's the right word, but it certainly, I was very, very nervous and worried about how I was going to do this speech.
Mm.
But I was invited to speak at a demonstration actually in DC. Um, and it was the United Against Hate demonstration. It was a year after the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. So we were
Mhm.
having one a year later, and I was invited to speak as a Palestinian to talk about Palestinian rights and to talk about the importance of Palestinian rights within the whole justice movement. And it was enough to, that enough was to make me nervous to speak in front of a few
Mhm.
thousand people. But I found out a week before the event that all these white supremacist organizations were doxing us, where that means they're trying to get our identities of the speakers and and then they put out the name of their speaker and their their photograph and their address, and so that people can harass them. So they were telling us we should wear hats and you know sunglasses, and that we couldn't use our real names. Anyway, all of this just was churning inside me, and I almost pulled out. And then anyway, I was not introduced with my real name. I was introduced as Z. and and I managed to do it. I got up there and I did the speech. My voice faltered for a little bit in the beginning, but I actually got myself to do it, and I got through the whole thing, and I was actually very happy with it after all. But for that last week, it was such a nerve-wracking and sort of a difficult place to be in.
Talk about high stakes and high pressure, because really what you're talking about is just speaking in such a way that in a situation that could be life-threatening or otherwise threatening. And so it's it's true that most people are not doing that, and yet most people have a fear of public speaking. So when you're adding these things together, I can only imagine how that must have been for you. For many people, just the speaking to that many people would be a really big deal. For anyone, no matter how confident, it's a big deal. And then to add that layer of fear onto it.
Believe me, I don't love public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always something that I have to work myself up for, and really get my nervousness and my heart beating fast. So I already have that, and then like you said, add to that all those other factors, and it was quite an experience. But I'm happy I did it. I'm not sure I would volunteer to do it again,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I've done it once in my life now.
I'm also aware that of the poets I know, one doesn't become a poet because you necessarily are like, I want to be in front of the public eye and I want to speak my poems aloud. That's often not actually part of the goal. Whereas for a performer, where you know that you're performing in front of people, that is part of it. So it often strikes me how, as you become successful as a poet, this is what you need to do, which is show up with your face and voice and your words. And I also understand that in many ways, it's a very big deal to speak your own experience. So there's one thing to put it on a page, that's a big deal, but to be your body and voice speaking your own experience.
I fully agree with you. And when I started writing, that was not what I had in mind, that I would stand in front of people and read my poetry. Um, at the same time, I have to say that I love reading my poetry. And not because I love this attention, but I find that it's it's very empowering for me to read my poems. And I think it's it's partly, it's a vulnerable space to be in, to
Mhm.
read your poetry, because your poetry is coming from your heart, it's coming from your soul, um but at the same time, you spent a lot of time crafting that voice, crafting that poem.
Mm.
And I, once I have that poem that I like, that I feel really reflects something about me, then I actually feel empowered reading it.
Mm.
Um, and so that would be, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
It's a
I,
good
I
thing
like
that you
that
have
part.
to do it. Yeah, I think ultimately when we're able to be fully ourselves in front of others, it's
Mhm.
incredibly empowering. And that's the golden ball of light on the horizon when people are afraid to do it, I think, is actually imagine how much you could enjoy it and imagine actually being well received for who you are. That's one of the best things that can happen.
Yes,
And
yes, absolutely.
we sometimes just focus on all the other things that we're afraid will happen. So bringing you to a most empowered experience of voice. I don't know if you'd like to read a poem about that first, or a poem that relates first or after.
I think so. I think that is my empowered voice, really,
Mm.
is reading my poetry.
Having your most empowered experience in front of us. You're sharing an empowered experience in real time.
So, and I don't want to build myself up before I actually read my poems to you, but I have a poem about aging, which is something I think about a lot these days. Um, I saw a headline online. I think it was an article about movie stars, and the title was Ali McGraw turns 79 and looks totally different. So I use that as the title of my poem. Ali McGraw is aging, and I am too. I want to click on the headline to see her and Sophia Loren at 83, Sidney Poitier, 90. Just how is Ali totally different? Will I think that her face has aged not so well? How pronounced are her wrinkles? How blotchy her skin? How ashen her hair? It's as if the stars and the drama parallel my life, made to come back and entertain again. But they arrive with an unsentimental update. Even the famous and the beautiful will wane and change like flowers past their peak. My own body, in an arc of decline, has begun to accept the news, the sagging and forgetfulness too. Outside, the spring daffodils have died, tulips healing, petals dried. Bending my aching back, I snip stems and remember loveliness, an obituary in images. My fingers flick away gnats like nettlesome thoughts.
What really stood out to me is they arrive with an unsentimental update. Such a
The
wonderful
news.
phrase. And I noticed that you moved into nature again as well.
And of course, Sidney Poitier has died after I wrote this poem.
Yes.
So this poem a few years old, but yeah, I like to bring in nature. I feel I often write um, about the river because I
Mm.
live near the Potomac River, so I walk there all the time. I talk about trees. I talk about the moon. There's just a lot out there that just really speaks to me, and I make a lot of connections and metaphors.
In this moment in my life, what speaks to me there is the inseparable nature of ourselves from
Mm,
nature. We are of the earth and we are part of. And I think it's taken us a long time to even start talking about ourselves ever in that way.
yes, I think we tend to forget that.
We do. We
True, we
talk about
separate
human
ourselves.
beings as these separate things, whereas we're completely children of the earth and part of everything and affecting everything and affected by everything. So I really appreciate that aspect in your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whose voice do you love and why?
You know, I love a lot of voices. I think about singers mostly. I think about, I grew up listening to Joni Mitchell and I love Joni Mitchell. There's a Lebanese diva called Fairuz. Maybe you've heard of her.
I
She has
have.
the most beautiful, beautiful, resonant, gorgeous, deep voice. Um, and I think of the iconic voice of, James Earl Jones or any of these people who are just have amazing voices. But the more I dig deeper into whose voice I really like, I have to say that I love my daughter's voice. Her name is Lena, and she is a professional musician. She's actually a jazz vocalist. And I could just listen to her for hours. She has just a very versatile voice, a wide range, and just a lovely quality. And she also, she's great at scatting, um, but she also can imitate other voices and many accents. So she just has this amazing, lovely quality to her voice and a playfulness as well. So that's who I would say, and um, that's I know it's probably not the answer you were expecting.
Oh, there's no expected answer. I've had people talk about their loved ones as being their
Okay.
favorite voices. My partner has one of my favorite voices, so that's absolutely great.
I have a poem about her actually, if you'd like to hear that.
Yes, please.
So let me just pull that up. So it's called Jazz Singer, and it's dedicated to her for Lena. In a tenebrous corner of the hushed cafe, her face reflects light from muted candles flickering all around. The faint, brassy gleam of the saxophone foreshadows a subdued melody that will pull her in, two voices improvising and scatting in conversation. The bass will then rumble, the piano keys will ramble, the drums will play a dependable rhythm. The band will watch closely when she ushers in the pulse of the song, like the intros of Ella and Bessie and Duke. A one, a two, a one, two, three, four. They will follow her hand for clues to stop, repeat, or continue playing as she makes a circle in the air with her index finger or a raised fist, sometimes closed like a heart, others open, then slowly folding in, while fingers snap to etch beats over a palette of sound. Then her lids down, hand gently clasping the microphone, a voice mellifluous and undimmed starts to flow, a bright light in a dark room.
It's lovely. And in its own way, a love song.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, thank
Did you
you.
have a question for me?
I do. I actually have two questions for you.
Okay.
Um, One is kind of a larger question. I love your whole approach to voice. I love the way you mind and body together and history and culture. Um, how did you arrive at the realization that voice is sort of the crux of everything? That did something particular happen in your experience, or was it an accumulation of, experiences and in theater and public speaking and psychology and, other things?
It was an accumulation. It does really come from the voice training that I was exposed to at RADA, where I trained in London that long time ago. The voice practitioners, there's Fitzmaurice, Patsy Rodenberg, and Linklater. And the latter is the one whose work I sort of did the most consciously. But all of them understood the holistic nature of voice. And
Mm,
so I did a interview with Tanya Moody, who's an actor who trained at a similar time as me. She's the first one of this series. And it was clear that she'd had the same experience. And I didn't know if she would, or that wasn't something I was thinking when I asked to interview her, but we ended up talking about the centralization of voice. I was here for high school.
mhm,
I'm half English, half American. She's Canadian. She's over time totally changed her accent. So we also had this shared experience of having different accents. And then in my family, people have different accents. My children's father is an immigrant from Guatemala, and we live in Oakland, and there's some different ways of speaking here as well. So just it's sort of a dual piece around the cultural aspects.
Mhm.
The psychological aspects I really understood through my own training because it's very much a part of that and about running sound through the body and a lot of visualization. And then later I was fortunate to decide to do an MFA, a late career MFA, in which we really dived into the Linklater voice work. And then my voice teacher actually asked me to take over a job that she was doing at a local university in San Francisco. And people were increasingly asking me to teach voice. Of course, I have always been aware of what happens when my voice is psychologically shut down. So the training made me very open to my body, to sort of sink the mind into the body. When I first started training, I was always watching myself from out here. I wasn't particularly in the body. But the work we did with movement and voice really awoke that in me, and I never really lost it and would therefore know my throat's closing up and I'm just so wanting to say something, but I feel I can't say it. And, I had that experience until relatively recently. It's still something that's sometimes with me, but I had a long marriage in which I felt like I was constantly required to show up with voice. I did, but it was still difficult or physically tense. And then in leaving that, I had just a real renaissance. So that's a very long answer, but um, it's been, I guess what I'm saying is it's been a sum of all of these experiences, starting with the training, which for actor training in these times really is about that holistic process.
Mm. That's so fascinating. I'm sure breathing is a huge piece of all of this.
Central.
Yeah, because I know when my voice falters, when I'm nervous, I just, at first I sit up and then I take a really deep breath and I try to, you know, just help my voice and not rush through things. Um, I'm sure there's a lot more to this. So my second question, you touched on a little bit, and it's about being bilingual and speaking different languages. And I find that when I speak English with people who speak Arabic or who prefer to speak Arabic, I end up with an accent in Arabic. I mean, an accent in English. I would speak that way to my mother always. I would roll my R's and, and enunciate much better, better. And it's so interesting. I hear myself and I'm almost like, who's speaking now? But I lapse into, it's like a code switching, right? It's a type
Yes.
of code switching.
Yes.
Um, and so I just wanted to have you say a little bit about this. I thought that would be an interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's very evocative. The idea that you would speak to your mother in an accent more similar to her accent is really interesting. And Tanya and I actually talked a lot about code switching. And here's what just came to me, and hopefully you'll see why. I was thinking about Wales. So in Wales, there's North and South Wales, and I can't remember which one, so forgive me if you're Welsh, or you can tell me. I could look it up. But in either North or South Wales, Welsh is much more spoken, much more commonly spoken. Welsh is a live language that people speak. There's Welsh television. But in the part of Wales where there's less Welsh spoken, people from that part of Wales have more of the language in their accent when they speak English. So the Welsh accent from the part of Wales that doesn't as much have as many Welsh speakers is much more up and down, and for lack of a better word, more musical and more how we think of the Welsh accent. The Welsh accent from the part of Wales where they do speak a lot of Welsh is very, very much more subtle and has some things a bit in common with the borders, English borders. So I think it's something to do with wanting to put your identity into the language. So
Mm.
we have a lot of Spanish speakers. My son's name is, with appropriate accenting, Jeremias. And his friends, so in where I live in Oakland, California, Spanish speakers will refer to, if they're speaking in English and say they're very native English speakers, but you'll hear the language being put on appropriately expressed through many of the place names, people's names. Maria, they'll say Maria or Carlos, and then they're speaking in an American accent the rest of the time. And I think it's a way to honor the identity such that because I speak Spanish and not fluently, and I'm in that world, I will do it too to an extent. Like if I'm with my son at home, I'll go Jeremias, sort of an American accent.
Mm.
But if his friends are around, I think, oh dear, I need to say Jeremias. I mean, he's my son, and he has this Spanish name, but obviously I'm not the native Spanish speaker. So it's a very strange thing. I don't know what you get from that in response to your question.
No, it's fascinating. At least I know that I'm not the only one who does this. And I think it's something, we don't even think about it. I think we just do it sort of automatically. I think certainly I do. I don't think about it when I speak to Arabic speakers, we sort of seamlessly go from English to Arabic and back to English and, back and forth. Um, but it's so interesting that and I think it is an identity thing, definitely. And I want to say Khalid with a kh, I want to say
Yes,
it
yes.
correctly. And all the other, yeah, yeah.
It's
So
a way also to communicate with each other. It's a form of code switching too, to say when my friends call him Jeremias and so on and so forth, or refer to often foods, right, with the accent that's appropriate. So I think it's about, okay, so I think it's about connection at bottom.
mm,
In the conversation we're having, it's making me think of whether it's the Welsh connection to the language through the rhythms of that language being put into the English, how they speak English, when they don't have necessarily their Welsh language, or connecting with your mother by speaking as she does and your own culture,
mhm,
um, or connecting with each other and indicating I am a friend, or I'm aware that this is not the word from my language. I mean, it
mhm.
can move into pretension for someone like me. So if people don't know me in I'm not in the family context, so I sort of feel my way around that. Um, but I think it is a desire to connect.
Yeah. I also there's also something about authenticity here. And I was thinking about when I listen to the radio, to news and reporters from different parts of the world, and if they pronounce the name of the city or the person they're interviewing correctly, it gives them a little bit more credibility also.
Yes, absolutely. I look up people's names usually beforehand because that's another thing as well. Just even not saying someone's name as best as you can correctly can create such a distance between you.
Right?
And which is why I go by SJ, because my name's Susan Jane. And if I go by Susan Jane, people will call me Susan. So SJ encompasses, and some people call me that. And so I use that to avoid that disconnect.
Mm, Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the names are so, my brother has a name with another Arabic letter that is hard to pronounce it. His name is Fatih. It ends with a ha.
Aspirated.
Yes. And
Hmm.
people have trouble when we first came to this country, people had trouble saying his name. And so I remember the principal of the school asked him, well, what does it mean? And he said, well, it means like victor, victorious. So people started calling him Victor for years. His name
Oh
was,
my goodness.
and then when he left high school, he decided, that's really not him. And he went back to his name. And he's always been Fateh, but it's so but names are very, very crucial in our identities, for sure.
Yes, yes. And I think if one lives in a place where everyone has a different name from somewhere, it's going to be maybe a little easier. But I think names are just,
Yes.
do we always navigate that correctly? Whether me as a teacher, am I being sensitive in the right way or not? It's just one can only just keep attentive to ourselves. How do we want to be called? How do we want to have an experience? What can we control? What can we not?
And I completely appreciate your, being respectful and wanting to pronounce names correctly and making the taking the initiative and making the point.
Well, thank you. Having had a name that was constantly not said correctly, or people would say, but Jane's your middle name. I'd say, no, it's not.
Well, I've had this issue my whole life. People have trouble saying Zaina, but because it's not spelled in a way that looks like Zaina,
Mhm.
Zeina. Um, but it's not a difficult name to spell,
It's
to
not a
pronounce.
difficult name, and English isn't phonetic either. So names may not look like what they
Exactly.
sound.
Exactly. That's
Mhm.
true. Anyway,
Thank you so much for speaking with me. I would love to have people know how to contact you, and it sounds like you have a new website.
I do. It's just my first and last name. So it's www.zeinaazam. That's ZeinaAzzam.com.
Great.
So that's the best way. And you can also send me a message through the website. And there are several poems that are linked on the website if people want to read more. And just some articles I've written, more
Lovely. I'm so
information.
glad that there's more for us to investigate because it feels
Thank
like
you.
we've only scratched the surface. And I really appreciate your time today, and it's been really lovely to explore these things with you.
Thank you so much, SJ. I appreciate that you invited me and reached out to me. And this is a lovely conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you.